and you are listening to Crossing the Nerdverse. We got a really special episode tonight. I am unbelievably excited. We are going to be wrapping up the month of Final Fantasy, celebrating Final Fantasy's release into MTG, and kind of exploring its impact across several different nerdverses. As always, guys, I'm going to open this up for two things. As we go into tonight, we are going to be talking in depth about a lot of Final Fantasy content. If you are currently or plan to play through any of the Final Fantasies in the near future and you do not want spoilers, I caution you against this episode. Now, many of these games are well beyond the green light realm for spoilers, in my opinion, but there are a lot of us that want to play through like 16 or the remake of 7. Spoilers ahead. Now, before we get into the meat of it and exploring our Final Fantasy topic tonight, let's go ahead and cover some nerd news. We have a few things interesting kind of crop up in the last week. So I'm going to go ahead and start us off with the announcement that Bernthal will be reprising Punisher in the new Spider-Man movie. I think that
Yeah, I
sounds
did
kind of
see
cool.
that.
It actually inspired me, Bones. I wanted to throw it over to you. How often has the Punisher and Spider-Man kind of worked together? I know they were both NYC based, but
Well, that's the Punisher was introduced in Spider-Man.
oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, his
Interesting.
first appearance is trying to kill Spider-Man.
That tracks.
He was actually initially introduced as a villain as well. Um,
So he's
but
kind of got Wolverine syndrome.
his character was like so popular. Yeah, I mean, pretty much his character was like so popular that they brought him back, and then put him kind of in the anti-role or anti-hero role over time. So yeah, I think
He-
that's gonna be fun. I'm looking forward to seeing those two on the big screen together. That'd be cool.
Oh yeah.
He's kind of like Ben Affleck's Batman, where he just kills a lot of people, doesn't take shit from anybody.
You know, I know that Batfleck caught a lot of like hate and stuff. I liked it. I
Oh,
thought it
I
was good.
loved it. I thought he was a great Batman. I just watched Batman versus Superman the other day, and like did not realize how like great he really was as Batman. Like definitely up there for me with Christian Bale. Like
Yeah.
they're probably tied for me.
I've actually been
It's
really
just
impressed
Bale
with
had a better movie.
yeah.
Yeah,
I've been really impressed with a lot of the performances coming out of the Batman stuff recently because I did not have any faith in Pattinson either. And in my opinion, he's crushing it.
Realistically,
So,
there's never been a bad Batman. They're usually bad movies.
yeah,
Like you
that's
can
true.
hate George Clooney's Batman all you want because it had nipples. To me,
Terrible
George
costume
Clooney
design.
is Bruce Wayne. Like we don't know what the guy does all the time. He's always with supermodels. Like he is the
Yeah.
epitome of like he could really be Batman right now. Like we don't know. I mean, he's
that's
probably too
true.
old now, but like he was always you like catch weird pictures of him on speedboats with like supermodels. But generally speaking, we didn't know what the fuck George Clooney was doing.
You know, back
So
in the day, me and my friends used to joke, and this was way back in the day. We used to joke that Clooney was a perfect Wayne, and Van Kilmer was a much better Batman. Of course, this was before Christopher Nolan's movies came out, and we had like the Dark Knight and the whole change to the tone and vibe of the cinematic Batmans, right? I'm still a big fan of those old Batman movies. I loved Tim Burton's runs. I thought it was great. Like I laughed my ass off at all of them. So Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze will be my headcanon for all of eternity.
something else that came up was they finally. So I'm confused with the Simpsons and I have to look it up, but I know they're ending the show. Now I don't know if it's this season
Ooh,
or next season is the last one. But so Marge Simpson died in the most recent one. Spoiler afterwards, because I don't worry about spoilers. Um, they actually showed her like in heaven and everything. So that was a weird take for them to do with that show.
yeah,
Like
that's a big move.
they've gotten rid of characters before, but they've never, I don't know, never one of the family. So that was kind of interesting. And yeah, like I said, I don't know if it's 36 or 37. Either this year or next year is the last season. I know that for sure because they had written about it already. So it is coming to a close. This was season 36. So
Well,
I'm not gonna lie. I haven't watched The Simpsons regularly in like a decade.
yeah, same. I actually just had to get on and look up like kind of when it started and how long it's been going because I know The Simpsons is a huge like cultural icon for a lot of people, right? It
it
was a
predicts the future.
yeah, Matt Groening predicting the future. Um, and so, but when you look at something that's been running since effectively the shorts became part of the Tracy Ullman show in April of 1987. And so you're talking, what, 38 years for an animated sitcom to be running? That's insane. Cheers didn't get nearly that. Like, that is wild.
Yep. So it'll be sad when
Wow.
it comes off. I still watch like the Halloween stuff and things like that because Disney
Yeah, I watched
Disney
the
Plus
Treehouse
makes
of
it
Horror and stuff.
available.
In
So it's
fact,
pretty
that's the
cool.
only Simpsons I've really watched here recently has been like the Halloween special with my kids, right? Because my kids are finally old enough where I can let them watch Simpsons without feeling like I'm a terrible dad. So,
At least you're not having them watch South Park.
oh no. I don't need
Not-
to introduce them to brain rot. There's enough out there already.
I love South Park, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
No,
I
it's
think
Yeah, I
actually
think it's
Trey
a great
Parker
show.
and Matt Stone are phenomenal writers, phenomenal creators. I went and watched their little play that they created, Cannibal, recently.
yeah.
It was fucking hilarious. I think that they've done a great job. I think they do a great job with South Park. It's still very relevant in recent years.
Absolutely.
They take shots at any and everybody too, so I
Yeah.
respect that. Like they don't play one side or the other, which is great to see with how things go nowadays. It's nice to see they just take it at everybody, and nobody is safe.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
I can respect that.
Well, and there's a few things about South Park that I think makes it a really interesting franchise. I mean, it's very artistically rendered. It's easy to like recreate the art for, which makes it easy to market for, right? They are unbiased in who they make fun of because everything is fair game. And honestly, what sells South Park to me, even though I'm not a fan, and I'm obviously not a fan, right? It's not my jam, but it's not made for me. It's made for other people. And I love listening to the interview of the two guys that created it, where they're like, "Oh, everybody's claiming you're a sellout and you're doing this and you're such a sellout. How do you respond?" And they're both just like, "Uh-huh. That was the plan. That was always the plan.
Yeah, they make that money.
Make the money." And so I do got some respect for it, but yeah.
So the thing I gotta mention first of all is the Magic the Gathering Pro Tour happened in Las Vegas, and Kin Yukuhiro took it with a mono red aggro deck,
Hell yeah.
winning him a nice prize bag of $100,000. This is the first standard tournament with a like Universes Beyond crossover, so it was interesting. He only had 2 cards actually that were from the Final Fantasy set though, so, and one of them were in his sideboard. So I don't know
Yeah.
how frequent they saw use, but
Yeah, I
it's just
haven't
an interesting little fact, and we'll see how things go from here.
You know what? I'm just gonna bring this up. I'm happy to see a mono red aggro deck take it. Like, I am so tired of watching white control every year. So
Also, yesterday was my favorite day of the week, New Comic Book Day.
woohoo.
Wasn't as crazy as last week, but we did get some interesting one shots that Marvel dropped. We got Giant Size Age of Apocalypse, which the giant size books are just like a little bit bigger comic books.
Yeah,
Hence the name giant size.
they offer you a better like chew, right? I love
Yeah.
the giant size issues.
And then X-Men Demons and Death #1 also came out, which looks like a pretty interesting story. So those are some good Marvel ones to pick up. DC, Absolute Martian Manhunter is still going. The new one came out. I'm loving all of the Absolute stories. I highly recommend them. Absolute Batman
Absolute
is
Batman.
my favorite Batman of all time.
What? Tell me quickly.
Well,
Because
he
he's
uses a
the
great
working
axe.
man's. No, he's the
Like,
working man's Batman. He is literally, he's not a billionaire. He's just a dude
yeah.
that wants to like make shit better.
He's like a civil engineer, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Is it
And his
still Bruce
parents, like,
Wayne?
yeah, he's still Bruce
Yeah,
Wayne.
he's still Bruce
But
Wayne.
but his parents aren't super rich. His dad was a teacher and his mom was a social worker. Like he was just like, he's like an everyman, you know. And I fucking dig that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the Absolute series is fantastic. Absolute Wonder Woman was amazing.
Yeah,
Absolutely love that. And Absolute Batman, that's a hell of a read. Like, and I say this because the issue caught me so by surprise, but Batman with an axe is something I was not ready for.
Does he kill people?
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, not really.
I mean, as much as any Batman would kill people if it was real, but not really, right? He actually goes out of his way to not kill people.
Okay.
So, and DC this week is a new history of DC, DC Universe, Prestige book. It's like 48 pages. So it's pretty big comic. Probably interesting read.
I've definitely got to get the Age of Apocalypse one though. I think I've got like all the runs of Age, or I've had them at one point. I have lost my collection a long time ago, but so I'll have to pick up the new Age.
I also want to talk about the Lord of Mysteries, which is an anime that premieres tomorrow. Very excited about it. It is from a Chinese web novel. Looks really fucking cool. I think Ryan, I think you probably like it. It's like a mixture of kind of mystical powers and Victoria era England. Yeah,
You're saying all my favorite things. Like,
yeah. There's like some kind of Cthulhian mythology there going on. Like, it looks like it's gonna be pretty good.
all right, no, that does sound fantastic. Take all of my favorite things, put them in a blender.
Oh, and just so everybody knows, I think this is the first live action that's getting a sequel. I might be wrong, but Lilo and Stitch, they came out and said they're making the second one. So we'll see how that goes
Cool.
since they changed the ending. Again,
Yeah,
apologies, I didn't realize it was such a big change. I thought it was just the big sister went to college. So I'll have to watch the live one. I'm sure it's still good. I'm a big Stitch fan, so
you're. I think you're muted, man.
muted.
How about now? There we
Yeah,
go.
I
Yeah,
got
you're
you.
good.
Got you.
So I actually agree. I'm a big Stitch fan. Both of my girls, my children, are huge Lilo and Stitch fans, and I was really nervous because both of them went to go see it in theaters, right, to see the new live action one. And it was actually a weirdly really big moment because I had heard about the ending. I was very much against it, but I didn't want to put my biases on my kids, right? So I'm like, you want to go see it, you can go see it. And my youngest ended up getting a free movie ticket from summer camp, effectively, and so she got to go see it. And then my oldest actually went. That was her first time, kind of on her own. She got to go see a movie with some of her friends, and they both thought it was fine. They thought it was good. Even my oldest, that was able to like pick apart the same stuff that I was bothered with, she was just like, "Yeah, it's fine. It was okay." And so I think they probably did a really good job with the movie, despite my personal complaints, which I still hold. But
Yeah, no,
yeah, sorry about the spoilers there. Survive in the chat. This is going to be a very spoiler heavy episode, my friend.
Though
So
most of the spoilers are much longer. That was a rather recent one.
yeah. Well, and that was kind of the whole inspiration for the nerdy news segment at the beginning of the episode, right? We are laughing about spoilers from the Final Fantasy series, which some of these are 30 years old. And it was like, okay, well, I mean, if we're going to talk about nerdy news, we can do some spoiler nerdy news, hence the discussion about The Simpsons and the Lilo and Stitch and stuff. So I apologize for those of you that we've spoiled that for. We'll be more careful in the future as best we can, anyway.
So then, having finished our news, time to
Yeah.
get into the topic of Final Fantasy and how it's affected pop culture, some of the icons of Final Fantasy, uh, and some of the effects outside of pop culture, which I think are going to be really interesting when we get to them. Some of the stuff that it's influenced is, I think, a little bit surprising, and I'm excited to talk about. But I mean, first, I think we should just talk about like the characters and kind of how they've influenced things.
Okay.
And right off the bat, you know who it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's Cloud, Strife, and Sephiroth, right?
Sephiroth. Yeah.
We talked about them both before. Man, Sephiroth even got a fucking song that is phenomenal. I mean, it's played by people who don't even know who Sephiroth is, and they will still enjoy that
Absolutely.
song. That's how good it is.
It's
With, of
used.
course, One Winged Angel. I'm
Yeah,
talking
one
about.
winged angel. Well, it's used at every D&D table ever, right? If you play background music, um, then anytime you're fighting the big bad evil guy, one winged angel is fantastic boss music, and I can't believe how widespread it's actually gotten. We joked about this months ago during Wrestling Month, right? Because there's a wrestler that Travis watches frequently, whose move is called the one winged angel. And yeah, it's wild how far just that character, just Sephiroth alone, has gone.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't forget Cloud. Like, he's one of the first characters kind of to do this mix of like amnesia, PTSD, and like the anti-hero kind of feeling, right? Like, and that's like feel like a common trope in a lot of JRPGs, especially.
Oh yeah,
Following and the Buster Sword silhouette is as I was talking about before we started this podcast, like one of the most recognizable weapons, and according to the Oxford uh, Book of Weapon Games, the most recognizable fantasy blade, which I believe that's probably true.
yeah. I've been chewing over that ever since you brought it up before the episode, right? Where it's like, hey, by the way, this has been officially defined as the most recognizable fantasy blade in pop culture. And I've been going through the other ones that I would consider recognizable, but if I show my wife the Bustard Sword, she knows what it is. I can't show her like the Blades of Chaos from God of War, right? She won't know what those are. And even Masamune that Sephiroth carries, long katana is not
Yeah.
identifiable enough to be like, oh, that's Masamune. Um, and so yeah, I think it's probably accurate, specifically within Fantasy Blade, right? Like I can't think of anything that contests.
I think the big thing is it's just big swords. Like anytime you see big swords, not like Sephiroth's blade, like you said, that's a big katana. Other shows and animes and stuff have done it. But when you think big sword, you always revert to Final Fantasy and think of Cloud.
Absolutely.
Like
Yep.
anytime I see it in an anime, anytime I see it in a video game or something, like I immediately
Yeah.
am
The,
brought back to like Cloud. So I think that's part of the reason it's like the most famous sword is just because of that particular thing too. Not so much the Buster part of it, because I'm gonna guess a lot of people can't think of the name. Like I didn't know the name for the longest time. I don't know why, um,
I
or I
mean,
didn't retain it, but
I'm sure you're right. Like people would see it and they may not say Buster Sword,
they say
but they're
Final
like, hey,
Fantasy.
that's Cloud's
Yeah.
sword. That's that Final
Yeah.
Fantasy sword, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Uh,
and when I started doing my homework for tonight's episode, the amount of stuff that I didn't even know that came out of the Final Fantasy, I guess, franchise IP, is wild. Just how far it has gone. Before we get into it too deep, guys, I am going to take this moment to address our listeners. We are very excited about this particular episode, and we're excited to hear what you have to say. We want to know your opinions, your favorite characters, what influence Final Fantasy has had on your life or the lives of your friends. And so, if you can, give us a like, give us a comment down below so we know what your thoughts are. And most importantly, give us a follow because we know the way.
yeah. And then can we continuing in the vein of Final Fantasy VII? We can't talk about Final Fantasy VII and not mention Aerith's death
Hmm.
halfway through, right? In an era pre-social media where there were no spoilers, this is something that hit everybody, right? Like nobody
The golden age.
yeah, nobody got out of the grief that this caused, and in fact is actually used in papers by academics studying player grief to this day.
Absolutely. Well, it was definitely, I think, my first time that I ever experienced that, right? And I was a very avid reader at the time. I read novels all the time, and so a character death was heavy for me. But video games at that time were kind of more safe, right? There was not a lot of threat usually because I mean you're talking Mario and King Koopa, right? You're talking Sonic the Hedgehog. There wasn't a lot of
Permadeath.
yeah, permanent. There's not a lot of stakes in those games, right? I'm not going to play Banjo Kazooie and worry about my friends getting killed. Although, um, but Aerith's death was so sudden and dramatic, and they gave it so much attention that for me that was devastating and might be my first real like video game death that had me by the throat. And it makes me wonder if it was just the first one for a lot of people.
Plus, also on top of that, the way that she made the bond with like Cloud and stuff like that when he was going through all the stuff in his head and everything. So like even as you got older, when you played the game again and you had a better concept of things, like it still like affected. Well, it still bothered. Like it hit me in a different way when I was older
Yeah,
because like you saw from a different point of view. So I mean, I don't know if they made it intentionally to have such an impact, but it definitely is probably the biggest moment in any game I've played.
Yeah, I think they
Yeah, I
did
would
make it.
say.
I think it was intentional because they did in Final Fantasy VI, moving backwards a little bit. One of the like big moments there is Kefka Palazzo, the villain, um, winning halfway through the game, and you're like, the first time you play that, if you don't know, you're like, what the fuck? You can't beat
Right.
him.
Yeah. Well, and then you have, especially with Aerith and with most of these characters, you have this real concept of this is the character that she's not dangerous. She's the healer. She's soft. She's tender. She's vulnerable. And so obviously she's the one that dies, right? And there are so many games that will not do that, right? Peach is never really in danger of that. And so yeah, huge, huge impact.
She was
Well, that's
also
what I was saying. Like,
the last of
it
her
was the
kind.
Yeah.
first permadeath. That's also why
Rough.
I think they did a big change with the new series, because they wanted, that was a way to like hit people and kind of do something different.
Yeah. So I think next, following Final Fantasy VII, um, what? Yeah, 6 again has one of their first female leads, which is like pretty cool. But she's kind of overshadowed, I think, by Lightning now,
Yeah.
because you get Lightning, and the character is so popular that there's a Louis Vuitton crossover.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. There's like a Louis Vuitton spring line that's based on Lightning.
Yeah, I think too. Lightning though came out at a different time than 6. Like,
Oh, for sure.
so much more story to it, and so much like graphically and stuff. Like, you could see Lightning in a better way than you can.
I mean, it was graphically better. I think 6 has a better story.
Yeah, I think 6's story is fantastic. But I mean, graphics wise, it's hard to compete at that.
Yeah. Well, it's SNES versus fucking like what?
PS2?
360, PS2, like that era.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's easier for people to kind of gravitate towards Lightning. It's more recent and stuff like that. So
And then I don't know. So I mean, then Lightning was also a big deal because she was also the first solo box art like female.
Yes. Yeah. I
Uh,
mean,
Oh, I didn't
not
know
only,
that.
yeah, they, well, and here's the thing, Final Fantasy, and I'm gonna reach out a little bit beyond Lightning even for a minute here. Lightning was a huge one because Final Fantasy is not afraid to push the boundaries of what is socially acceptable at the time, right? Not only do we have strong female characters even in the earlier games, then we have female leads later, solo female box art later, and especially when you get into 14 and 16, the LGBT representation in Final Fantasy is better than nearly any other game out there. And so they're not afraid to push those boundaries.
Noctis and the Bros. I feel like, I feel like
Yeah, exactly, right? And
they're just roommates.
yeah, definitely just
I got-
very close friends in other ways that historians say that.
I just pulled their card, the car. Like, I pulled the
Yeah.
card for that.
Nice.
The regalia. That's it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Now,
It's
actually,
nice, dude.
we just threw the question out to our chat on YouTube. So I'm going to ask you guys as we're going in the concept of how much they've affected your life, where you've seen them outside of inspired media, and how you felt about representation. Do you have any favorite characters from Final Fantasy just as a franchise? Anybody stand out above the others?
Sephiroth.
The one-winged angel. I feel you.
So it would probably be Zach. I think
Zach's
that was the character, because they hint at him so much, like when Final Fantasy VII came out. And they just, like, he gets mentioned and things like that, and you're like wondering about him and stuff all the time. And then of course Square Enix, being as smart as they are, eventually do develop a game where you get to see this particular character, and you get to play through and kind of see what happens to him. So that was pretty cool, because that's one of the first times that I can think of where a game hinted at somebody like so much like that, and eventually made a whole spin-off game just about him. Because he
Yeah.
hasn't been, as far as I know, in anything else. And the game was based around him in a sense. So He'd definitely be Zach.
I feel that. That's good stuff. Mine are a little bit boring. I think my favorite Final Fantasy character, if somebody just asked me my knee-jerk reaction, is always going to be Red 13. I love the fact that one of our characters was just a smart, intelligent canine. Like, I thought that was cool. Absolutely fell in love with that character when I was a kid. But it's hard to get past Sid for me. He appears in like basically every game. He's
Which
always
Sid though?
hilarious. So I actually, it's kind of dumb. My favorite Sid is Advent Children. Like,
Interesting.
yeah, I know it's kind of dumb with all the Sids out there, and like he's far from the most powerful or the most interesting, but dude had a badass airship and quotable lines. I can't get over that. So
So on, I think really more important character kind of to talk about in the modern settings. So with 16, you have Clive, who I think uh, may not be as strong as a character. I think the story's not as strong as some of the other entries into this list, but he's like this shift to like a modern action protagonist. Especially with the pivot towards like the real time combat. I think it makes it more of a, I don't know, like more of, they add a little bit more of a HBO style storytelling to it.
It was interesting. I really felt like his character, like they put a lot like there, but then they didn't flush things out. So like his character had a lot of like super potential. Like I loved it. Like the beginning was really great. I just felt like as he went along in the story, like his particular character kind of dropped off. Um, Now I would imagine some of that was because spoiler, Sid dies, which I think was like he had to do it to push the story along, but like so important to keep that story like a little bit lighthearted. Um, I think it was horrible to kill him. Anyways, to get away from that, Clive,
well,
like definitely after that point, I really felt like his character, there was so much potential for like the emotions, the different things to go through it. And they just, I don't know. I didn't feel like they did him enough justice.
see, with Clive Rosefield, for me personally, it's not very frequent or often in the games where you're playing somebody that you know right out of the gate is super important, right? Like he's the firstborn son of Duke of Rosaria, and while those characters have been featured prominently before, your main protagonist is usually much more like blue collar, right? He's a soldier, he's a bodyguard, he's a whatever. I think even Lightning, I don't remember exactly what she was coming from. And if you do have some kind of bloodline or interesting tie for the character, it's generally reserved for deeper into the game, right? It's a big reveal. We didn't get that in 16. We knew we were playing the firstborn son of the Duke.
Well, yeah, and that's why the beginning of the game started off so good. Like you got so much out of it is because you got to see that side of it. And like, of course, the buddies like trying to help the famous guy have friends and things like that. So it wasn't bad. Like I said, I wish they would have developed it a little bit better. He had a lot of potential to be up there as a character.
Okay, we already mentioned One Wing Angel, which fun fact, the first game track to ever use a live choir.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
But there's some other Final Fantasy jams that also deserve a mention here. One being, of course, Prelude, which is
Oh,
the intro
yeah.
to every entry. Like
All of them.
it's a sound that you might not know what it is, but if you heard it, you're like, oh, that's fucking Final Fantasy.
I'm pretty sure I used that on one of our posts at one point when I was talking Final Fantasy on our Instagram.
Also, Liberi Fatali, the intro to the big cinematic scene in Final Fantasy VII, was phenomenal as well. Like it's just a great opening, and it's like the first kind of game that has that kind of cinematic opening with a great like composing around it. So uh, I think Final Fantasy VII, you're gonna get like several entries off of here. Or I guess that was eight.
Well, and we had I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation. Nobuo Uematsu
Mhm.
was the primary composer for so many of the Final Fantasy like series. He didn't actually end up resigning until like 2004, and so he's responsible for so many of those super. And you brought up Prelude, right? Those super iconic Final Fantasy sounds and
Prelude and One
soundtracks.
Winged Angel.
Yeah, and
Jeez.
One Winged Angel.
If you think about it, any great story has great audio to go with it. Like if you look anytime I bring up a story, like if I bring up something, you'll definitely hear the music with it. Like Lord of the Rings,
Oh yeah,
such an amazing Star Wars, like another one that's always good. The Final Fantasies, like any story that I consider like top notch has great audio with it. Now, because you get some things that come out that are just good stories, but they just can't hit the audio right. I find like certain things fall off like that, like Harry Potter. Harry Potter was a great series, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I can't think of any audio that comes from it that was really that like grabbing. Um, like video game wise, I can think of a few that are good, but like nothing has like iconic as the Final Fantasy
I might argue
series.
Halo.
yeah, Halo. I'm gonna give Harry Potter its due because the takes flight from Harry Potter is very recognizable, especially amongst the fandom, and their Christmas Hall song that's been used.
But
It's
like
not as identifying as like
that's
Peter Jackson's stuff for Lord of the Rings, naturally. But I mean, when you're
nobody
dealing with the
talks about it when you talk Harry Potter, though. That's the
yeah,
difference.
nobody brings
Nobody
up the
ever
music.
talks
Yeah,
about the
Um,
audio.
when you bring up Final Fantasy VII, like talking about the music is a
that's part
huge
of it.
part of it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, back with six in the opera scene, like it was like one of the first games. It was on the SNES. And it had an
yeah,
opera theme, like it had a nice sound chip. It's showing musical theater on a SNES game. That was like
yeah. That's
phenomenal.
well, and Uematsu himself has been quoted as saying that Final Fantasy IV, which came out on the SNES, was one of his favorites because that was the first time he could add more subtlety to his music. And I think that's super cool. And 4 doesn't get a whole lot of like flash out credit. And so I'm going to shout it out to it because that was one of the ones that started down the music path for Final Fantasy. And what's interesting to me is I owned records that were just the soundtracks from the earlier games. And it's just 8-bit music, right? It's very simple, very basic. I loved it when I was a kid. Now, the music that we're seeing in Final Fantasy, particular after we entered the area like Final Fantasy 7, that is world-changing music.
I mean, well, we could talk about what is it, 15, 14, and 15. 14 having Shadowbringers, which was
Oh,
a Billboard's World Album Top 10, and then Somnus from 15 has like over 100 million streams. Like uh, they're not unpopular songs, right? Like
yeah. You know, even
I,
even outside the songs themselves, you're talking like you brought up Prelude a minute ago. The victory fanfare from Final Fantasy is one of the most recognizable sound bites out there. It's up there with Link opening the chest, right? And so the
Honestly,
this
I was
go ahead.
sorry about that, but honestly, in general, Square Enix is just amazing with music. Like if you look at all their games, like Chrono Trigger
yeah,
is
Chrono
another
Trigger.
one that's got like the audio is incredible. If you look at like Nier, I know a lot of people didn't play the first one for whatever reason. Best story ever. Um, I still listen to the album to that game sometimes. Um, Square Enix is just like so good with video games in general. It's very surprising that like it seems like they've struggled lately um, with what they're putting out.
You know,
Yeah,
and 14 was an interesting one. So I all but skipped over 14. I think Bones, you pulled me in to play it for a few weeks. I kind of tried it out. At the time, the MMO scene was not really my jam, and that's what it felt like, right? The game improved so much since then that it's barely recognizable as the same thing that I tried. And I do think that bringing up the music for 14 is it's worth it because that music was fantastic
Well,
when it didn't have to be.
also, I mean, Shadowbringers is from the DLC Shadowbringers, so I think 14 is an example of a game that kind of flopped. It was a Final Fantasy game that kind of flopped on its initial release, and then they immediately made changes and immediately improved it, re-released it, and it was hugely successful. It's still going to this day.
For those of you interested in such things, Uematsu was hired through his Smile Please studio to score the original Final Fantasy XIV music, the first game in the series in a decade to have a score completely composed by him at release. The theme song Answers was sung by Susan Calloway with lyrics from game writers, I'm going to try, Yaeko Sato and Michael Christopher Koji Fox.
Wow.
So, I gotta wonder. Do you think, like, because Sephiroth is introduced with the one-winged angel, right?
Mhm.
Like, do you think that has influenced boss design in games?
So
Wow, actually, the Latin chant is a trope now. And I don't think we saw it before Sephiroth.
I think Sephiroth had a
Huh.
huge impact on the gaming community just because of the way he was introduced, the way you saw him, what he went through, like his relationship with Cloud. So I think he, like, boss wise, he had a big influence on just boss in general, like main villains, because of how loved he is, like, and he still is.
Yeah, for somebody who was a villain and evil and twisted, and he was the bad guy of the series, right? His motivations were so easy to understand. You know, he had a brotherhood in soldiers with Cloud. He was protecting Genova. He was just kind of crazy.
Little bit insane.
A little bit insane, yeah. Just a scooch. And I'm trying to, like, when you're thinking about his introduction, right? And I brought up Advent Children a minute ago. Advent Children's a really good example because they recreated it really well with his introduction in the movie. Speaking of inspired in other media, anybody that has not watched Final Fantasy Advent Children, I love it. I know it's not a film that gets a lot of attention. I think it's great.
So let's talk. I mentioned, the Louis Vuitton lightning thing earlier, which is like lightning modeling Louis Vuitton clothes in ads. There's a couple other real world crossovers that I think really kind of show that the game also transcends the video game genre and has spilled over into real life. And that is, of course, the Audi R8. No, I'm just kidding. It's actually cup noodles. I'm talking about cup noodles. Audi R8 actually does have a crossover with Final Fantasy, but the cup noodles one is the one that everybody remembers. Nobody remembers
Yeah.
the Audi one. Literally, the brand cup noodle was, in the game. There was also ads outside of the game using cup noodle, using the Final Fantasy characters, which again, I think it's just like they are so popular that they have really stepped outside of just being game characters anymore.
Yeah, you don't. So there are very few examples where the video game characters are used in marketing outside of the medium, because even Master Chief from Halo, right, never really got farther than Mountain Dew. And I mean,
and Nerf
gamers
guns.
and Nerf guns, which Nerf will take on anybody. I'm not going to use that as a milestone, but you know, Mountain Dew's gamers drink Mountain Dew, and so using Master Chief for Mountain Dew, that made perfect sense. I love I love the cup of noodles because we're all broke and we all drink Mountain Dew and eat ramen. Like, and I think that's hilarious. And that's not even, when you start thinking about things that they inspired, there's a lot of video games and franchises that don't move beyond their game, right? They never get spin-offs, they never get anything else. They never even get a comic book. And with Final Fantasy, you have just everything, novels and manga and anime and movies. And Final Fantasy VII, I think, is kind of uncontested that it's the most influential of the entire franchise, and at least in my opinion. And watching
Oh,
some of the
for
stuff that,
sure.
yeah, Well, and just earlier there was a news article that popped up on my phone. I should have brought this up during the news because it would have been apropos. But Final Fantasy Tactics, they're getting ready to re-release Final Fantasy Tactics. I don't know if it's a sequel or a remaster or what's going on.
Remastered.
It's a re-release because they're actually changing. It's like remaster because they're changing some of the story as well. They've said,
Yeah.
which I think is a good idea.
Well,
Just
I
like with
personally,
7.
I loved the quote during the interview where it was somebody from the dev team, one of the original creators. It was like, yeah, we're going to re-release it because the message um, is staying the same and the world hasn't changed in the last 30 years. And so you have people on these teams that are trying to use this game and this platform to change the world literally, right? Trying to make the world a better place through storytelling. And I love that. I think that's fantastic.
Did y'all know there was a Netflix miniseries about father-son bonding through the Final Fantasy 14 MMO?
No.
Yeah, it's called Final Fantasy 14 Dad of Light.
Oh, I'm going to be checking that out for sure.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, but I just think that's another like it made a show on Netflix related to the game, right? Like,
Well, that's like they just released. There was an grandmother that passed away, and like she played it, and like her kids saw all her characters and stuff like that, and like there was some ceremony in the game for her and stuff like that. Like that's more of an MMO thing, like than just Final Fantasy. But it is just to show like Final Fantasy is like
No, I think
and the
that's huge.
people, yeah, the people playing the MMO still are like they're a very loyal fan base to 14 in particular.
And I have a soft spot whenever they do honors like that in video games. And we've only seen it a few times in recents with the rise of like a game can be made or ignored because of its reception on social media and its reception on YouTube, right? You get a major YouTube let's player pick up a game and play it. That game will get lots of attention. That's how I originally got into the indie gaming scene because I never paid attention to anything before. And then I started watching a few people on YouTube playing games I'd never heard of and wanted them. And the big one for me is Mark Fishbach, Markiplier on YouTube. There is an honorific, an honor for his dad in Doom 2016, where there is a book on the shelf that's got his dad's name as the author, and I think the book is called something like How to Appropriately Comb Your Mustache. And I think that's fantastic, right? Just that little thing that the developers did, and seeing that Final Fantasy has been that influential in so many lives to the point where they're making documentaries about it. That's amazing. I think that's super cool.
people have to realize like video games have a huge impact in a positive way when it comes to different things like story and stuff like that. Like it's just like reading a great book and everything else. It's not just brain rot like some people think. Um, and and companies and games
Oh,
like Square Enix and Final Fantasy are forerunners for that. Like
there are literally university courses taught about the Final Fantasy mythology, translations, and even like the gender representation in the games.
Hmm.
So I mean, let's again like so influential that there's literally courses on this story. And I don't think that when they were writing the game they meant for it to be that big of a deal, right? Like they're just telling a story that they love,
Oh yeah.
but it has become that big. Like people have really latched onto it, and it's because it's a good story. It's because it's done so well.
Well, and like we said in the intro episode for this month, right? Final Fantasy is called Final Fantasy because it was the dude's last ditch effort. He's gonna make
Yeah.
one last game, call it a day, and boom. Talk about sticking the landing, right? And so I was reading through some of the other media releases, and I'm just on Wikipedia right now. And Final Fantasy Tactics, which I brought up just a minute ago, has been adapted into a radio drama. And Final Fantasy Unlimited received a radio drama sequel. That is awesome. And you brought up inspiration and that kind of stuff. We can see a lot of different mythologies that got brought up and used in Final Fantasy in really interesting ways. There's so much Norse mythology, even with the fact that it's called Midgard in Final Fantasy VII, right? Cerberus and a lot of Greek mythology kind of makes it. And so I went ahead and I looked up games that have like been open and inspired by the Final Fantasy series just to see where they landed outside of their IP. And some of them makes perfect sense. Dragon Quest, right? Seventh Dragon 3. Fantastic. Sea of Stars, Crisis Tales. And then there's a few that caught me off guard. Octopath Traveler.
Octopath
That's a
Traveler.
good one.
That's not that shouldn't confuse. They literally marketed that as a like Final Fantasy like game.
Did they really?
Yes.
I don't think I knew that. Wow.
They put 2 of them out. They're good.
Yeah, they are good.
So, man, I'm not gonna be able to do these names. Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy, is also kind of responsible for Lost Odyssey. It shares a lot of gameplay and narrative elements with the series, which I think
I
is
don't know that
cool.
one.
Lost Odyssey was big in the early 2000s with Abe's Odyssey and Munch's Odyssey and that kind of stuff. But here's the one that caught me by surprise, and I warned you all about this before the episode. But Witcher, the Witcher series, even from the novel's inception, were heavily inspired by Final Fantasy, to the point where Witcher 3 was redesigned in order to incorporate a better open world design and narrative focus to match Final Fantasy storytelling. And I think that is wild.
Makes sense. Guy carried a big sword. Guy drank potions. Kind of like materia. They
Yeah.
just changed up materia into potions. And then I mean you can
So
see it.
I have another question for you guys though. Talking about Final Fantasy 16 earlier, and it switched to a more like actiony kind of storytelling, and the change in combat. Do you think that this is going to be something that, if it's included going forward, is going to reach more of an audience, or do you think it's just going to alienate more of an audience?
I'm inclined to go with the latter. I think that the turn-based combat is iconic for the way Final Fantasy has worked. Much of the fan base loves it because of that. We can see other franchises using that in order to break into the scene. Claire Obscura with Expedition 33 is a perfect example of that. And maybe I'm just being an old fogey about it, but I don't think it was a good move. I don't think it's going to open up more audiences.
This is Ryan's the old fogey with this one. It's not me. So I think before we make the decision, they have to make another one. And they have to have better party incorporation and better character development. Because my only problem with 16 boss fights, there was like button mashing, like not button mashing. We had to time it and shit like that. Like it wasn't a true Final Fantasy boss fight. So that made me mad. And then the character development and stuff like that, like wasn't that great. I thought the fights were great. They were fine. Um, but like you had so much going on and it wasn't they got to redo it, make it with better party members, stuff like that, and do it like that. And maybe what they could do is do the action like when you're running around, you could do it like an action scene like they were doing, and then once you get to boss fights, switch to turn base. Um, because those are usually your longer ones anyways, where you need some more strategy. And instead of like every time you're running around and then you get in a fight, it zooms in and slows the fucking game down. You could just have live action fighting going on right away. But I do think that they're at least going to mess with it going forward, just because it speeds the game up and just the way things go. And the biggest complaints I think with that game weren't even the combat.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with most of your assessment there. I do think that Final Fantasy has always been turn-based, and that it's what, like, I mean, turn-based games are still popular. People still like to play turn-based games. So I understand, like we talked about before in the previous episode, the Final Fantasy always kind of pushes the bounds of their games, right? They're always changing stuff up. Um, So
Oh, yeah.
whether or not we'll see it going forward, or some other hybrid system like you're talking about, I think is just like an interesting path that they could take. I would be surprised if they didn't revert it to some form of turn-based with future titles, though.
Well, and like you said, they're always pushing. They're always wanting to try new stuff. They have succeeded more times than they have failed with their experimentation. And so I do not want to encourage them to cookie cut, right? Do what you do, continue to push those boundaries, change up the way the game is going, explore new ways to control your character until you come up with something cool. Now, I like turn based. I agree with you. I think more turn based games are coming down the pipe. I think they're very popular. I think we're going to see a lot more turn based games after Baldur's Gate 3 and how popular Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop RPGs have become. All turn based combat, right? Even if you're pen and paper, it's turn based combat. I personally would love to see, and it's not realistically feasible. I would love to see a Final Fantasy game that was wanting to do more action style stuff where you set up and nominated a full turn and then hit play. And then that turn played through in like simultaneous action, right? The boss makes his attacks, your people go where you told them to go, they make their attacks, and then it stops again, and you set up another turn.
Like
There's a couple games that did that, like the old Baldur's Gate. You could do that. I used to do that all the time, where like I would pause the game if it was a really big fight. I always felt like it was cheating, but you could pause the game. You could like dictate where all your people go and do, and then you hit play, and they would
Yeah.
all do what you dictated for them to do. Pretty sure both 1 and 2 Baldur's Gate did that.
Yeah, I believe so as well. Didn't XCOM play out like that too?
XCOM was actually the inspiration why I brought that up. So,
I never played that one, so
oh, you should. You would actually enjoy XCOM.
XCOM's really good. Yeah.
Now, here's the thing that I'm going to bring up in regards to modern gaming and the Final Fantasy in modern gaming. Turn-based combat is rough for multiplayer.
Yeah.
And if they're wanting to reach out to a multiplayer fan base, they're going to have to change something.
Well, I mean, sort of, because then again, we talk about Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, and actually, you're absolutely right. Well, and that gets into the hybrid stuff that Eric brought up, right? You control your character in real action or real time everywhere but in combat. And then you just continue to control your character in combat. That actually might be Baldur's Gate might be the way that we see future Final Fantasy games kind of going if they want to go into a multiplayer market.
If they do, though, I mean, like
if they do, yeah.
I think they got the MMO going,
Yeah.
and they're still
which
doing stuff with it. So I don't think they're going to worry too much about online gaming with their games. They never have, and they don't need it.
Yeah.
So I think they'll steer clear of that and just let 14 just keep going.
Yeah, I
but-
suspect you're correct.
Well,
I just see them keeping some of the non-turn based stuff just because it was faster paced, like it's quicker, it lets you do more. Like I said, maybe turn based when you fight bosses and stuff like that. But I definitely I can see them keeping a lot of the like the Devil May Cry, the God of War type thing, because they need something new.
I'll be curious to see what the last entry in the Final Fantasy VII remake looks like. I wonder if they're going to implement any kind of new things there, or if they're just going to keep it in line.
No,
with the
they'll
other
keep
two.
that normal. They'll keep that normal.
I think I'm not sure it would be a good idea to twist that too hard. People were already upset about the minor changes
Yeah,
from
true.
the first one. So,
fun fact about 14 real quick. 35 million accounts in 2025. Over 35 million accounts.
wow.
And just another fun little number. In-game wedding services has hosted 75,000 plus ceremonies.
Holy
Believe
crap.
it. MMOs, man, that's like once you get addicted to that stuff, that shit's like crack. I know I shouldn't say that probably, but like it is though. Like
They are very addictive. I agree.
I spent a lot of time on EverQuest. Like I could run through super high levels at very low levels because I knew how to run because I just played that game so much.
Well, and
Like,
here's
it
the
was
kicker.
dumb.
I agree with you. I still play DC Universe Online and I play solo. I don't have people. I don't have a Discord channel or a league or any of that. I just play that solo, and I still love that game. And so, yeah, that's wild. Man, that is wild.
I'm probably gonna get back into 14. I need an MMO. There's no other
Yeah,
good ones out right
that's
now.
why I was just thinking about that, and I was like, man, let's just play that. My wife actually loves that game too, so we could play it together.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm so done with WoW. Like, I tried it a few times and stuff like that. So,
Well,
I'm gonna
and
go back.
I was gonna bring up, I didn't play 14 long enough to really explore this, and we saw it a little bit in 15 and 16. But for the most part, Final Fantasy has been able to avoid the negative aspects of game development culture that we're seeing right now. Not a lot of subscription services, not a lot of, you know, pay to win, paid DLC, releasing a broken or unfinished game and then selling you the last 2 chapters later. There is some, obviously.
I mean, yeah, there's in-game purchases in 14 and stuff, like, but I
Yeah.
can't think of anything that was like scandalous, like the $500 horse in fucking
In Elder Scrolls.
No, and WoW.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, I should know. You said $500. Well, and it starts with the
Or
horse armor
fucking
from Elder Scrolls, right?
don't get me started on fucking Diablo and fucking
Oh
Blizzard.
man, yeah. No, I'm not gonna lie. I used to absolutely love Diablo, right? And again, another one that I'm sure draws on a fair amount of inspiration. Don't know for sure, but I'm sure it does from Final Fantasy. Diablo 2 was fantastic. It's one of my favorite games of all time.
Yeah.
When
Best one in
Diablo,
the series.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Diablo 3 released. Diablo 3 gave me a chance to play Diablo with my friends, and I thought that was super cool. It completely is a different game, just the same universe.
Yeah, no, Pathfinder or not Path. Fuck. It's another PF, not Pathfinder though. PoE, Path of Exile.
Oh
That
yes,
was
Path of
that
Exile.
was the true Diablo 3 in my opinion.
100%. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Diablo 3 was a fine game for what it was. I think the reason it caught hate is because it wasn't a Diablo game. Because you're absolutely right. Path of Exile was the spiritual inheritor to what Diablo should have been. And if they were going to do something with Final Fantasy that tried to really push for a multiplayer style game, right? And I'm thinking a narrative multiplayer game, those do not do well right now. Outlanders, I think, was a fantastic game. We just talked about that on Sunday Bones. I think it was fantastic, and it never caught on because narrative multiplayer games are rough. They're hard to do. But I would love to see a Final Fantasy game similar to the way that 15 was done, where you and your buds are cruising around in your convertible doing stuff. That is a 4-player multiplayer kind of co-op Final Fantasy game. I think it'd be fantastic.
See, I don't think it would do well though. That would be your problem.
No, yeah, and this is just, it would be great for me, right? But
yeah,
I also, it's weird to me to think about the crossovers that we have gotten, right? Final Fantasy crossovers and heavily inspires things like Kingdom Hearts. They have all these other games that they've crossovered with or inspired to the point where I honestly kind of think they are likely the origin for the entire FromSoft Dark Souls series, which drew a lot of inspiration from Berserk, which drew a lot of inspiration from Final Fantasy. How is it we got Street Fighter crossovers in Monster Hunter before we got Final Fantasy crossovers in Monster Hunter?
that could be any number of things. Like, you don't even have Final Fantasy in a lot of different things. Like, what's the one everybody plays all the time? Oh, why can't I think of the shooter?
Call of Duty?
No, the one that everybody's always on. Everyone's
Oh,
building.
Fortnite.
Yeah.
Fortnite.
So I'm surprised we haven't seen too much Final Fantasy on Fortnite.
Oh yeah, like a Sephiroth skin or something, because they make skins out of everything.
Oh yeah. So I've never actually played Fortnite. I know some people that really enjoy it. But isn't there like random like singers as skins and like Peter Griffin and stuff?
Yeah, Darth Vader.
Oh, everything. Like they make everything a skin.
Now let me ask you this: if Final Fantasy decided to start branching their IP into multiple genres, right? And because you could have a Final Fantasy in nearly every genre given the storytelling they've had, I would personally love to see a single hero FromSoft, like Dark Souls style Final Fantasy game. Could be awesome. You look at Final Fantasy VII with the soldier program, you could do a first-person shooter soldiers program real easy. You could even do it Borderlands style, where you have your little team of super soldiers that are looting weapons and materia and stuff. I think it could be a lot of fun, and I cannot think of. I mean, there's even been rhythm games for Final Fantasy, right? I can't think of a genre that we can't just plug Final Fantasy into, which I think is a powerful thing for their image.
But I think part of that though is also the reason that you think of it that way is because there's so little about each story. So like, while there's a lot there's so little you learn and so much you want. Like you want to know so much more of what goes on. So there's a lot of mystery to each one. That's the word I was looking for. Shit. Mystery to each one of the games, which lends to the fact that you think of it in any genre. Like you want to play the soldier because you want to know what happens with it. And that just goes again to the storytelling that they do. They make it so like literally every part of the game grabs you. Like you want to know the soldier program, you want to know the avalanche group, you want to know this, you want to know that, and like you want to do it. um so that just again, it's just another thing that lends to like how great they make these games. And while I'd like to see it, I think part of the mystery is what kind of gets you.
Uh, I think that we forgot to mention the biggest Final Fantasy crossover to date. The whole reason that we talked about Final Fantasy, Magic the fucking Gathering,
Magic the Gathering,
the
yeah.
biggest MTG set of all time. Like,
I can't find a collector's box anywhere.
Oh no,
I know.
it's blowing all the records out of the water. And here's the thing: Magic the Gathering, up until Universes Beyond, which has not been, it's not something you've been doing since the '90s, right? Universes Beyond has only been in the last few years, and Magic was a very insular world, very insular community. They had a lot of very strict design rules. We brought up earlier, Magic does not want guns represented in their universes. They had a very strict setup. And the fans, whenever something changes in the Magic the Gathering world, fans will riot. The fact that Final Fantasy stepped in and was just welcomed is amazing to me. Fallout didn't pull that off. Warhammer 40K didn't pull that off. Doctor Who didn't pull that off. But Final Fantasy, they were sold out before they even released. Pre-orders were through the roof.
No, I got one. It's crazy. But part of that is though is like the fandom to it though. Like while people love and play 40K and things like that, like it's not a similar thing. Again, Warhammer's fleshed out, you could do a lot with it. Like all those other ones are kind of fleshed out and there's so much to it. With Final Fantasy, like they probably haven't even most of the people that bought into that probably haven't played that game in forever. The nostalgia that
Years.
goes with it, like with Fallout and things like that. Like when Fallout came out, the TV show was out. You were playing the video games on the weekend. Like there's all these things going with it. Well, Final Fantasy coming out on Magic, the only thing you really had is just Rebirth and stuff that was out. It wasn't you didn't have a lot of the shows. Um, you didn't have a lot of extras with it like everything else. So I think that's part of the reason like Final Fantasy did so well. Is the nostalgia compared to the other ones, especially Seven being the main thing that they showed. It's just the nostalgia from that drove that series.
You're
You're
muted again,
muted.
right?
Yep, I sure
That's okay.
was. I think it's worth mentioning, actually, that the Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy release did have a major competitor in another trading card game that still has an active tournament circuit and is still widely played, and that's the Final Fantasy trading card game that was released in Japan in 2012, and then the English version worldwide in October of 2016. And so Final Fantasy was only beaten by Final Fantasy.
It
I
makes
think that's
sense.
awesome.
Magic's so huge. That's people's jobs, man. Like,
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, I have one more question for you guys. Is there an Easter egg related to Final Fantasy VII that you know about that was like kind of your favorite?
Ooh. I didn't start looking for Easter eggs until relatively recently. I don't think I have one.
Definitely don't.
Have you ever played Deus Ex: Human Revolution?
I did.
In that game, there is a poster for Final Fantasy 27.
Oh, did not know.
Awesome.
Which I
Well,
love
I
that
know
game.
these.
So I think that's probably my favorite. Like little
I
Easter
know
egg.
these aren't Easter eggs, but those ultimate weapons that you can like hunt down and find.
Mhm.
I thought that was a great idea because you don't need them to beat the game. They make it a lot easier, but you have to be like to get them. You got to be pretty grindy
Yeah,
because you have to
you
have
could.
quite the character set to take them down because they deal some stupid damage. So I thought that was rather cool in Final Fantasy VII. That's something I liked. If you really wanted to kind of get crazy with it and get crunchy, um, you could do that and you could strive towards those weapons, which were harder than the final boss.
You know, in Clair Obscura at Expedition 33, there is a train that's all frozen over, and I think it's the exact same train that they transported Genova on.
That wouldn't be surprise me, man. It would be kind of cool.
Yeah,
Are either of you familiar with the anime or manga Higurashi?
I am not.
No.
It's very popular, like mystery horror anime. But yeah, the person who wrote the stories chose his pen name from a Final Fantasy like kind of riff.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Nice. Uh,
And again, why the game is so big and so loved,
yeah.
man. Like,
Well, and
it's
here's the thing.
crazy.
In our very first episode that we ever did here on Crossing the Nerdverse, we talked about fandom and geeks and the different meanings and that kind of stuff. I don't think until the Magic the Gathering release I realized just how unbelievably loyal, hardcore the Final Fantasy fandom was. I am so impressed with this fandom because it's powerful, it's huge, and you don't get the stuff that you get with like Star Wars where everybody's bonding over hating on it, right? Like Star Wars fans enjoy spending time with other Star Wars fans to tell them how much they hate Star Wars. It's super weird.
That's
Um,
because it's North America. Final Fantasy is a lot of Asian countries.
but yeah, I
There's your
I got a lot of
difference.
respect for this fandom. I think it's fantastic. The influence that the game has had on popular culture since the 90s has not slowed down. It's only getting more and more.
yep.
The
So before we get out
expectation
of
now
here,
is a little. The expectation now though is a little high because like people are wanting a little bit much with it. And if the game doesn't touch everything, like 16 was good, but it got a lot of grief because
yeah,
it
Yeah.
wasn't
It
beyond
was
amazing.
it wasn't up to the level of Final Fantasy VII, like which is like crazy. Because you think about Final Fantasy VII like this little pixel art or like barely 3D, just barely more than pixel art, and it was just so popular, and people still think about that being like one of the greatest games. I think about it. Certainly, it's one of the greatest games ever made.
It
Uh,
agreed,
is.
agreed.
I mean, that's not even a. It is.
and so you like compare a game like Final Fantasy, any of the 3D titles, like post like 10 and on, right? Like they're like, oh, they look so much better than 7 ever would have, right? Especially without the remakes. And you're like, man, but they're not as good though.
Yeah,
The materia system in that game was the best part. It was so clutch and awesome.
well,
Everything
I
about
think
that game is just epic,
yeah,
in my opinion.
the materia system. I mean, you look at stuff that Final Fantasy. We talked about this last week. The job system, the materia system, the way they did skill points and have explored on how to level up, or it's difficult for me to appropriately explain to somebody that doesn't know or have any familiarity with it just how powerful these games are. But before we get out of here, guys, I am going to reach out to our listeners. If you are still here, obviously you're enjoying what we're talking about. And so if you can, give us a comment. Tell us what we missed. Tell us what your favorite Final Fantasy stuff was. Give us a like. Tell your friends to check us out. And most importantly, follow us because we know the way. With that, we're going to go ahead and get out of here, guys. We're a little bit over time. This is going to wrap up the month of Final Fantasy. And we're really excited to continue with you next month as we jump into a brand new topic. If you do have some aspect of Final Fantasy that we didn't cover that you want to hear about, let us know. We'll throw it into the rotation, and maybe your idea might inspire a complete new approach to the game over several episodes. With that, we're going to go ahead and get out of here, guys. My name is Ryan. I'm joined by Eric and Bones. We've talked Final Fantasy, and it was a fantastic time. See you guys.
Hi.